Hey everyone, this is Aaron from the future, and I just wanted to record a quick note about the episode that you're about to listen to and say that we recorded this a long time ago, and I had second thoughts about posting it because I wasn't, in retrospect, I just wasn't completely comfortable with the discussion about multi-factor authentication. And so go ahead and listen to the episode, but if you do, please also listen to the follow-up episode that we're actually about to record right now, which is about Asana and additional thoughts about the multi-factor authentication in Smartsheet. Okay, so enjoy, and we will see you in the future. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Connected Lawyer podcast. I'm Aaron.
And I am Bryan. And Aaron, I was talking to you the other day and found out that you've abandoned Microsoft To Do for another task management solution. And I have I guess I would say three overarching questions. One is why. The second is what process you use to find your new solution, and then what is that new solution and how's it working for you?
Yeah, for sure. And I think abandon is, I might have put that too strongly in terms of, have I just completely switched? I'm, to do app curious at this point. I'm in a transitional state with regard to my to do apps, and I'm looking at a new one called Smartsheet, and there are some, it's like everything. Okay. It's like every app that you look at. There are some things that it does absolutely wonderfully, and then there's some things that I don't like about it, or maybe I'm sort of concerned about, and I'm actually trying to work through those. So I want to talk about those things. But first of all, I guess I just want to talk a little bit about like what's not working for me in Microsoft To Do. And we had a
Yeah, I'd love to know.
Yeah, we did a episode on this a while back, and I kind of said that, this is our solution of choice, and we're still going to use it for some things. There's still some things that it does well, but I found with Microsoft To Do, and I will say that we hit a point a while ago where things are just very, very busy, sort of unusually busy, and Microsoft To Do was not really able to scale up with us, and so it was kind of good for what we were doing, but when we had some projects come that are really quite expansive, and it wasn't really able to scale up to it, and so that's one thing. And I think maybe another, or maybe a corollary to that, is that as good as Microsoft To Do is at what it does, it is not a very visually intuitive program for me, and I found that just really matters. And so, for example, one way that my mind tends to think, and has for many, many years now, is with this Kanban or Kanban type view, which more and more apps are putting in. But you and I, were talking about it back when it wasn't even cool at all, years and years and years ago with Trello and all of that. And so
Right.
I really like that. I really like having cards, as they say, which kind of, it can be a simple to do, or it can be a project. It can be something that your mind connects with that says, hey, that has action associated with it. Not necessarily an action item, but it is a project that contains action items, whatever. And that unit, that entity, which is the card, can get moved around into a lot of different places. And on my, what I'm experimenting with in Smartsheet is I have lots of swim lanes, I think they call them, or rows that you can put cards into. And so I'll have like one that's called urgent, and these are, okay, this is what I'm working on right now. So when I get distracted and I come back to my computer, I need to get put back in the zone. We'll just close everything off and just look at the two cards that are in the urgent column. Those are the things I need to do right now. And then I'll have another column that says today. These are other things that if I get to them, if I stay really focused and I work really hard, I can get to them over the course of the day. And then I have another column that would be this week, then a column next week, and then the columns just kind of get progressively more, where can
More
I shove
distant.
things?
Yes.
Backlog A, backlog B, things
17 weeks from now.
yeah, things I'll do if I can clone myself. It kind of goes on and on like that. But it's kind of nice because I can put everything up in one view, which is quite overwhelming when you're very busy. But then you can apply filters to it and you can say, okay, well, just show me things that have to do with the business, taxes and whatever, malpractice insurance, all the different things that you have to do to manage your business, QuickBooks, all that. And so then that takes away every card that isn't focused on your business. Or I could say, you and I are active in the bar association. I could push the filter button that says, okay, just show me tasks that have to do with the bar association. Just show me billable tasks, tasks that have to do with client obligations, things like that. So I really like that. And Microsoft To Do doesn't really do that. It does have the ability to move things around in a manual way, but it doesn't really have that card, kind of dashboard feel to it. So let me lead off with that and ask you kind of your thoughts on that. Does that matter? Does that kind of thing resonate with you? Because you use Microsoft To Do.
I do use Microsoft To Do, and I understand 100% what you're saying. And honestly, what you described sounds a lot like my experience using Trello, just in sort of your description of how it works. So I get that. And one of the reasons I don't use Trello anymore is that's not really how my brain works. And I think that's just a difference between how our brains work and work in different ways. But I will say, I think you've hit on something really important here, which is something I try to talk a lot about when I'm talking about different solutions that are available, which is what works good for me may be awful for you, and vice versa. And that it's really important to try some of these things out and figure out if they work the same way your brain works before you decide to, adopt them wholesale. The products that work the way your brain works are the ones that you're actually going to use. And the ones that do the job but don't work the way your brain works, you're just not going to utilize to their full extent. At least been my experience anytime I've, explored new products or tried out different solutions or things like that. So I think there's sort of two parts to this that are really important. One is sort of a self-reflection and figuring out how does your brain work, what parts of the products that I use appeal to me. And then two, it's just trying them out and figuring out uh what what works best for you. And right now, in the past that may have been a problem, but right now we're talking about task management here, so there are innumerable products out there. You can find one that works the way your brain works. You just have to find it and then adopt it. So I commend you for going through that process and finding something that works for you. Though I am curious, what makes this solution better or different from Trello, which I know you've used before because you
Yeah,
introduced it to me.
for sure. And I still use Trello. To be fair, I use it for a lot of things, but I don't use it for work anymore. And that's a really interesting question and a set of comments that you just made about using what works for you. And on a broader perspective, it's kind of, I think, a message to law firms in general. Law firms are always trying to get everybody, oh, you have to be on the same system. We're not going to be efficient if we're all working in different systems. And I think that's true at certain core levels. Like surely we should all know where the documents are and things like that. We
Right.
should all be able to open the file and see, the key things. But in terms of managing your workflow, what should I do next? What did I do yesterday? What are the next three things I need to do? All of that stuff. That is such a personal thing that I think that you've got to figure out a way to let everybody do that the way that works for them. And in terms of what works for me, I found in this little journey that I've been on, probably the past month or so, is that there's a class of products, Trello's included in them, and Smartsheet is in there as well, that are I'll call them grid card Gantt applications. And so in other words, that means that if I put an item, and let's say the item is, I don't know, file my tax return, something like that, and I can view that item on a list of other items. That's kind of a grid view, and it'll have item, and it will have client, matter, created date, any sort of metadata that you want to add. But it's basically a spreadsheet, or it's a list, and you can sort by the different columns in the list. I can sort alphabetically by the item name. I can group them by the client or project. I can, and any kind of way that you can sort a spreadsheet, you can sort a grid or a list in a to-do app. But then if you change the view, you can look at card view, which will then put that item as a box that can be moved from working on, up next, done, on hold, waiting for a reply, so sort of action oriented statuses as opposed to canonical type of statuses like client, matter, project, and task. So I find that extremely helpful, because when I'm thinking about what I want to do next, I will tend to want to look at the card view and see what is the list of things that I said was up next. What is the list of things that I'm currently doing? What are the things that I'm waiting for somebody to get back to me on? The card view, that action oriented view is helpful. But in terms of, if I just think of something pops into my head and I say, oh, where are we on that tax return? Well, the card view doesn't really help because I don't know where we are on it, right? I've lost track of that for a moment. So I go to the grid view. I know exactly where it is in terms of, I know what heading it's under. I know what project it's associated with. So it's a very, very quick way for me to find it. And then the Gantt chart view, of course, is just that typical, how many things can we work on at one time? What are all of the different projects that are underway this week? It's just a different way to do it. So,
Right.
with Microsoft To Do, it doesn't really do that. And yet, like Microsoft, it's such a sprawling, difficult to contain beast. It weirdly connects to different places in Microsoft where you can do that. Microsoft has lists. Microsoft has Planner. Microsoft has To Do and Planner. It has all these, it has Project. It has all these different things that seem to connect with each other, but they really don't connect seamlessly. They're just sort of aware of each other, and there's like data bleed between them, but I just can't keep it straight. And I'm tired of messing around, with Microsoft just having this unwieldy, sort of difficult to understand thing. And I've decided, look, Microsoft, you're for creating documents, you're for managing email, which you do those things quite well. But in terms of tracking what I'm going to do next, I'm going to be informed by Microsoft, but I'm going to use an independent platform that doesn't tend to mix it all together like Microsoft does,
I understand, and there are some great things about Microsoft 365, but it can absolutely be overwhelming. And the one thing I think that drives me nuts about it is they have multiple products that do the same thing, and without any logical difference between them. And that's really frustrated in terms of what you should be using, or you be making your group lists in List or in Teams or in Planner or in all three.
Right.
and
And then
and there's
Teams,
no
how does
way.
that come in?
Yeah, there's no way to know.
Yep. Yeah, it's
So
right.
it's
And it's sort of like if Microsoft had done what they do with tasks, if they had taken the same approach with documents, I think they would have completely, I think Office would have failed. I think WordPerfect would have taken over. And it's a good example where when Microsoft was rolling out Office, it was with just a singular kind of lockstep, containerized, easy to understand system, right? It's a PowerPoint, it's an Excel document, it's a Word document. Those things are tightly woven together inside Office. I open up Office. I can, if I want to draft a document, I use Word. If I want to do a spreadsheet, I use Excel. It's very, very clear which does what and how they relate to each other. And then for some reason, when they start trying to manage your to-dos, it's kind of like they have four different companies inside Microsoft that are competing with each other while at the same time stealing things from each other and mixing them together. It's quite frustrating in terms of what
It,
goes where.
it is frustrating. And one of the things you have to keep in mind is when they were developing those core Office programs, it was a very different world uh,
Yep.
than it is now. I mean, you got Word on, a stack of CDs, or even I've installed it from a giant stack of floppy disks before. So that's very different from what we're looking at now. And I think their business models just changed that much. So you decided you wanted this new some sort of solution that worked better for you. Uh, what process did you go through to figure out what to use like you said you're already using Trello. What made you go, well, I'm already using this, but I want something else that works similarly? uh, what caused that jump, and how did you evaluate what your options were?
Um, well, in the case of Smartsheet, they one of the I have sort of a key client who also uses Smartsheet, and so that was interesting to me. And you do this all the time, sort of more and more. I think as lawyers or any kind of consultative profession, you have to get comfortable with the idea of working out of the system that your clients work in. And so you just kind of get to a point where you have a lot of systems and you say, well, when I'm working with Acme Inc., they use Teams, and so I go into the Acme Inc. team, and that's where all the documents are. That's where the tasks are, and that's how I do it. So they're one of those for one thing. So that's kind of how I got exposure to it, which I think is kind of an interesting marketing thing. When somebody tees up a bunch of projects in a program and then they share it with you, then that company says to you, well, you can create a free account and just view this one board, or you can get a paid account and you can make boards of your own. So it was kind of like that. And then I kind of got into it a little bit, and there were some things that frustrated me right away, which I may get to if we have time. Um, so I kind of said, well, okay, what do I love about this? And I think what I ended up loving about it was just the way that it looks. And maybe that sounds superficial, right? Um, but I honestly believe that the way that you kind of visualize your workflow is very, very important. Like if you open up a program and it just seems completely intuitive, that's going to make you feel more productive. Whereas if you open up a program and you're constantly like, okay, well, where was that button and where did I look for this? You're not going to use that software very much. And so
Right.
so I put Smartsheet aside and I did trials of everything that was like it. You could do a search like Smartsheet competitors, and you can and that comes up with like every application that is a grid card Gantt class of application. And so I tried Asana, which I've had an Asana account for years and years and years. I just don't use it, right? But it does
Right.
this. You could put your tasks in a list. You can put them in a card view. You can put them in a Gantt view. It does that. I looked at Trello, which now they didn't used to, but now they were focused on cards, Kanban boards, but now you can also put those cards into a list and you can do other things. So I tried that. There's a program called Wrike, Wrike, which has come up in my searches, just sort of year after year. They've been around for a long time. I've never tried them because I don't like the name, which matters to me. I don't want to use an app that has a name that I don't like,
Right.
or a color scheme that doesn't appeal to me. Those are important to me. So anyway, I got a Wrike subscription. I got a Monday.com subscription. You name it. I think I went through all of the apps that do what Smartsheet does. And every single one of them, I all I could find myself doing is saying, well, how do I get this to look like Smartsheet? It's this is not how I want to see it. These
Right.
guys, the one thing I'll give to Smartsheet is in terms of whatever, people like me, the way that I like to see my task list, they get it. They get it. And the other thing about Smartsheet that's kind of nice is that it is highly customizable. I mean highly customizable. Um, Not so much like Notion. You and I talked about Notion .so, and I think they have Notion.com now, which is like so customizable. You're basically
Right.
building a piece of software from scratch.
You can do whatever you want with it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, except it's fun, but it's too customizable. I need some guardrails here. Um,
Yeah, I can see you going completely off the rails on something like that.
oh my gosh. Yeah, like if you wanted to just build something completely from scratch. And then Notion also has, there are professionals out there who make Notion templates and they look really cool and you can buy their template and just install it and they do that. They put the guardrails around it. But Smartsheet is kind of cool. It's like it does have those guardrails. There's a lot of things that you can't, that you must do the Smartsheet way. But if that's fine for you, it is just super customizable. The colors, the patterns. You can do, conditional formatting rules and say, hey, every time I make this row be like a level 3, you format it exactly this way with this color and this font and this everything. And so I finally got it kind of working, just exactly the way I like it. And it looks really promising in terms of, okay, now let's start shoving all of our data in there and let's start working out of this.
Right.
Well, and there is the rub. Okay. And
I
that's,
was going to say, it sounds great, but you did start by saying there's some things you don't like about it. So I'd love to
yeah.
hear that.
Well, I guess the thing that I don't like about it is it doesn't have multi-factor authentication. And there isn't an option as far as I can tell, and I have looked at all of the support boards. I have interacted with their customer support. I have a Smartsheet representative, and I've exchanged emails with him about this. There isn't any option for multi-factor authentication. Now, that's
Now,
not to
well,
say it's not to say it's
I,
insecure. I'm sorry to interrupt,
right.
but I just want to make sure. I'm not saying that that's wrong, but we need to talk about what that means.
Yeah, I will say that's one of the things that when I talk to, when I give presentations about evaluating services or whatever, or, people are looking for solutions. One of the things I say is if whatever you're looking at doesn't have multi factor authentication, you need to take a look at it and figure out why that is and whether you really want to use it without the multi factor of
Yeah.
some sort.
Yeah.
So,
Is that
what's
like
going
a
on?
is it
What's
like a
going on with
fatal
this?
limitation, right? Could you
Right.
will you put your tax returns into it? Will you put your medical records into it? What does it take for you to get to a level of comfort where you will put the most private confidential data into a cloud-based app? What does it take?
Well, and here you're talking about using it for task management. That's going to have client names,
Right.
uh, deadlines, the types of projects that you're doing for them. Like, there's a lot of information in there
That's exactly right.
that's
And
confidential.
and then you kind of have to think about, well, okay, well, what is the purpose of multi-factor authentication? What are we trying to protect against? Okay, obviously we're trying to protect against someone having your username and your password, and also the idea to use that on a particular application, right? So how would they get that? And the most common way that someone can get your username and password is through a phishing attack. Okay. So you get an email, important update from LinkedIn. Click here to, someone wants to be your friend, whatever. So you click on the email. It's a fraudulent email, but it pops open a LinkedIn splash screen that says enter your LinkedIn username and password. You do so, and now they have your username and password. Now, that's an attack against LinkedIn, but should you fall for that, the username and password that you provide in the phishing attack will be sprayed across many, many other cloud-based services. The same username will instantly be tried on Facebook. It will be tried on Amazon. It will be tried on Chase Bank. It will be tried on Google, Microsoft, Apple. And so if you use the same username and password and you get phished even one time, all of your accounts are compromised if you use the same username and password. So that's one way that someone can get your password. Another way that somebody could get your username and password is through a breach of one of these companies, right? So if Facebook is breached, or if LinkedIn is breached, or any single company that you happen to use, LastPass, we talked about that a couple of times, even they got breached and possibly gave up some people's usernames and passwords. And so it could be another company that experiences an attack, or it could just get picked up in some old archives, and you'll see this, for example, where, I don't know, people, improperly dispose of old phones or computers. They get bought on eBay. Well, people who find old computers, they start mining it for information. And it's possible that some old passwords that you had were stored in an insecured way that are accessible by somebody who can open the computer. And if it's a computer that you had in 1985, for example, it's quite easy to get into it using 2023 technology, and it's quite easy to rifle through the contents of it because most of it was stored in, once you're in the computer, everything else is insecure. And so you might have used like an old browser to store all of your passwords in clear text in an unprotected way, and then that makes its way in some kind of dumpster diving. And so anyway, there's a lot of different ways that somebody could get your username and password. And that's what multi-factor is sort of there as a relatively flimsy barricade against something that's already bad that's happened. Right? Somebody's already got your username and password, and they're already using it for malicious intent, and you hope that a authentication app or a text message is enough to slow them down long enough that you can get in. And another way that your username and password could be given up is if you just have a bad password that's easy to brute force, or that appears on a rainbow table, which is a list of, commonly used and all possible combinations of 8-character passwords, using standard symbols that appear on a keyboard, and they can just quickly try them all. Without having access to your password. They could just say, well, if it's any one of these that are a possible combination of 8 characters, we've already got a tool, that can offer them all at the same time. That's a brute force attack. So if we back up a little bit from all that and say, okay, well, how do we protect an account that doesn't offer 2-factor authentication against these things? Okay. One thing that we can do is we can make sure that the password that we apply to it is only used there on Smartsheet or whatever else application you're doing, and that it's never been used before. Okay, so it's completely unique to this service. So it's not out there, right? It's not going to ever be found in any sort of way. That's one thing you can do. Then you can make that password be long and complex and random. So it can't be guessed. It's not going to be on any conceivable rainbow table. There's no number of reasonable times that you can try and ever guess it. So it's not subject to brute force. You can do that. And then another thing that you can do, which Smartsheet offers, is you can relate your Smartsheet account to your Microsoft account. They have, as you see on a lot of sites, log in with Apple, log in with Google, log in with Microsoft. And Smartsheet has those options. But you have to be an administrator of your Azure Active Directory, your Microsoft 365 account, and you have to essentially create a cryptographic relationship between the Smartsheet authentication process and the Microsoft process, where Smartsheet has to check with Microsoft to get you in. Now, doing that doesn't eliminate the risk associated with your native Smartsheet username and password. That remains a back door. So if somebody does know the username and password, they aren't going to be challenged by multi-factor authentication and they can go in. But if you set it up so that you only log into the account with Microsoft and you never log into it with the native tool, and you don't know what your Smartsheet password is, it's just kind of archived as a long, ridiculously complex password that's never, this random, never been used before, and that you can't apply. So every time you go into Smartsheet, you only log in with Microsoft, which of course has an audit trail. It has multi-factor authentication, as all of the security that comes with the Microsoft apparatus. It's starting to feel better, right? And so now you're worried about, well, if Smartsheet gets breached, because they're the only ones who have, other than LastPass, they're the only ones who have the Smartsheet backdoor password, or if
Right.
LastPass gets breached. But honestly, if LastPass or Smartsheet gets breached, what difference does it make if you're using multi-factor authentication, right? That wouldn't have helped you in the
Right.
LastPass breach either.
Right.
So it's a higher level of catastrophe than getting phished or reusing a common easy password.
Yeah, that's a completely different and worse problem.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I like sort of how they're essentially piggybacking off of Microsoft's authentication to provide you with security. And from one hand, like I'm in favor of that. It's a lot like how I see using software as a service to store my information rather than to try to do it on a server here in my office. Like there are people whose job it is to figure out how to do this the most secure way. And that shouldn't be me who's trying to practice law. So I'm going to outsource that to a professional. And here, in at least one sense, Smartsheet has said Microsoft knows what they're doing in
yeah,
terms of controlling access and authenticating users or whatever. So we tell you go use them to get access to your account here, and then it's safe. And I guess from that perspective, that makes a lot of sense.
yeah. And it also kind of, I think it sort of requests a conversation with a group of professionals, legal professionals. You see this more and more, and I've heard this where there's a call for. I've seen people actually say, let's have a call for an ethics rule on lawyers that say every account that you use to store client information must be protected by multi-factor authentication. And it kind of makes you say, well, really, like every account, is that absolutely necessary, or what are you saying instead? Let's do a security risk assessment around the authentication process and see whether, how likely it is that unauthorized access can be obtained via the authentication credentials for the cloud-based account. That's a totally different way, I think, of reframing what otherwise feels like a knee-jerk reaction around legal tech and ethics, because it's not always possible to apply multi-factor authentication. And frankly, that rule by itself isn't necessarily going to keep you safe, because there are plenty of attacks that skirt right around multi-factor authentication anyway. So what we're really
Right.
talking about is, well, let's secure the authentication process. Now, the other thing I'll say about Smartsheet is they do have an enterprise account, which uses another type of relationship with Microsoft and other identity providers called SAML, right? Security Assertion Markup Language, SAML. And that is associated with a concept called single sign-on SSO. And so what you do with a SAML SSO configuration is you go into your Microsoft 365 account and you create an enterprise application, which they may already have one. You may just do a search and find the enterprise application that your cloud provider has already published and just install it in 365. And there's a process that I think a lot of people would consider complex, in which you make a very tight relationship between Microsoft and the cloud-based app, such that you create a security certificate in Azure, download it, and then upload it over to the cloud-based app that you're creating the relationship with. And once you connect them, at that point, if you connect Smartsheet via SAML-based SSO, you eliminate the original login process. Okay, so at that point, it's impossible to log into Smartsheet using the username and password, your Smartsheet username and password. Those go away. Those are no longer a valid way. And the only way that you can log in to your Smartsheet account is through your Microsoft 365 account. At that point, I would say, yes, it does have multi-factor authentication, and it is just as secure as if it were a Microsoft application, because it is at that point.
Because it is. But there you're talking enterprise, so I presume you have to have a whole bunch of people, and it's going to be expensive
Yeah, they
because
said
that's
to
that's
25 users at more than their published prices. So it sort of rules out the small users. And I just have to say, just in terms of vendors, I don't really like this practice. I wish that all cloud-based vendors would say, look, we're definitely going to have an enterprise platform, where we can cater to large businesses, but on the basic security features, anybody who pays gets them, right? I understand if it's a free account, you get what free is
right.
worth, right? But then they have a pro tier, which is $7 a month, and then they have a business tier, which I think is $25 a month and a minimum of 3 users. So $75 a month for the business tier. Well, the business tier should get the SAML ability then. It's at that point,
Right.
it's a business application, and you're still telling people, no, you have to be both a business and be big to to get a basic security feature. And I don't know. It doesn't sit well with me as, and then you come back to the app and you're just like, but look at it. It's so good. I mean, it is just such a great piece of software. It is developed by people who obviously care about this, and use it and think it through. So I don't know where I sit on this, to be honest with you. I'm grateful to have a
I,
show about it to kind of brainstorm this out.
I know exactly that thought process there. Yeah, and I do that every year when it's time to renew my share file subscription, because I look at that and I'm like, I'm one person. I pay for 5 users because for the plan I have, which has the features that I want,
Yeah,
that's the requirement.
that's right.
So in reality, I'm paying way more than I ever should for this, but it gives me the features I want, the security I want, in ways that other competitors don't. So, yes, I pay them way more money than I ever want to every year, and I hate it, and I do it anyway because I don't
Yeah.
have a choice.
And it seems super unfair to the solo small firms, right? It's how are you ever going to compete if the entire industry is sort of geared against you? The larger guys can get everything cheaper, and you can't even bind together in a cooperative. You'd think that, well, okay, let's have the bar association, make us a special relationship with them, so that you can get, the enterprise license cheaper or something like that. Or let's bind together, let's get 25 firms, or even, 5 firms who want to buy 5 licenses each, and let's buy a 25 pack of these enterprise licenses and dole them out. Well, you can't, because it's based on domain. And I
Right.
don't know that they have like a co-op purchasing program out there. So yeah, it's a little frustrating for sure.
Yeah, it is. It is absolutely frustrating. I know here in DuPage County that there are several other firms that use ShareFile because I see their link and their signature to securely share documents with them
Yeah.
or whatever. And every one of those people, like, they all have, you know, 20 or 30 licenses probably just because of the size of the firm that they're in. And I mean, that's a completely different animal than what I have, but Yeah, no, I'm still paying for 5 people instead of one, and there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
S-
So, yeah, so
So,
that's been like a consuming thought process, I think, for I don't know, a couple of few weeks anyway. Just and
and,
I can't say it's negative. Like I love going through all these apps.
right,
I really do like doing it, but at some point you just got to kind of do pick one.
and how it's working well for you?
I think it is. I think it's working really, really well. Like I love the way that it looks. I love the way that it has a potential to, collect a bunch of data. It feels quite promising. The other thing that it solves, which we talked about before, is this what I think is just this ridiculous thing about Microsoft To Do, that you have, my day, and then you wake up the next day and it's like the guy from Memento, you've completely forgotten what
Mhm.
you were going to do today. It just
Right.
disappears. Whereas with Smartsheet and really every other piece of software on the planet, it stores that. So, like I said, I can have a lane that will say urgent today and this week, and if I want to quit or dash away out of my office for a bit, I come back and it's still there. It doesn't disappear at midnight. So I like that.
Yeah, that is absolutely something that is awesome. That is the one thing that still frustrates me about Microsoft To Do. It frustrates me to no end. We sort of have the workaround that you taught me, which was just give everything a date for today, and that will sort of appear on, yeah, or for tomorrow, and then it'll automatically appear on your My Day, and that works. But still, that can be frustrating.
It is. And I'll tell you, if they asked me to run Microsoft, and I don't know that they
I'm
will.
sure the call's waiting.
I don't know that that's crossed their mind. But if they did, my top priority, I would say, look at every single functionality in this company that relates to project management and task management will be combined into a single application. Period. End of story. Outlook tasks will be the same if you're looking at to do, if you're looking at planner, if you're looking at project, if you're looking at lists. Every single thing that has to do with project management will be a single unified lockstep thing. And I would bundle that together with OneNote, honestly, which OneNote is great, except it doesn't seem to integrate with anything else, including its own self. And so, it constantly gets lost from the shuffle because it's not part of the rest of the party. It's like sitting in the corner waiting for you to call. Um, so yeah, it's so sprawling. I think they could have controlled it, but they really lost it, and Teams did not help.
Right. And yeah, I don't know that there's a solution now that's going to work, but well, I enjoyed your Smartsheet uh, journey there. I'm curious to see how well it's going to work out for you once you start using it here consistently for a few weeks in a row. So you'll have to report back to us
I
and
will.
let us know if you're still using it for anyone other than the one client that introduced it to you.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
Otherwise, I'd say probably a good place to wrap up. Uh, so thanks for sharing your journey. If anybody out there has any questions, comments, suggestions for topics, things that you'd like to hear us talk about, send us an email at info@theconnectedlawyer.com. Otherwise, thanks for joining us. I'm Bryan.
I'm Aaron. We'll see you next time.